Billionaire and mistress humiliated his pregnant wife at a party. Seconds later, Korean mafia boss her brother arrived. Unaware his pregnant wife was the cherished younger sister of Korea's most feared mafia boss, he made his mistress humiliate her at their anniversary gala while the city's elite laughed. What happened when a convoy of black SUVs blocked the hotel entrance left him begging on his knees. Go ahead, Mi-kyung. Baptize her. Let's wash away the last of the trash from my life. Jang Min-jae's voice cut through the crystal-lit ballroom as his mistress lifted a glass of red wine high, a cruel, painted smile stretching across her face. Kim Soo-yeon stood frozen, her hands trembling over her 8-month pregnant belly, her modest cream dress already stained from where she'd been shoved moments before. 200 guests held their breath. Phones were raised, live-streaming the destruction of a woman who had given up her family's protection for a clean life. Min-jae, please, our son can hear you, Soo-yeon whispered, her voice so broken it barely carried over the jazz music. I'm your wife. How can you let her do this? To us? Wife. Min-jae laughed, the sound detached and arrogant as he swirled his whiskey. You were a charity case, Soo-yeon. A quiet, obedient accessory while I secured my board seat. But Mi-kyung here? She's a partner. She's royalty. And you? You're just a peasant I'm finally evicting. He toasted the crowd with a smirk. Ladies and gentlemen, to new beginnings. The wine glass tilted. Soo-yeon gasped as the vintage Cabernet crashed over her head, soaking her dark hair, streaming down her face like blood, and ruining the only nice dress she owned. The cold liquid shocked her skin, making the baby kick hard against her ribs as if protesting the indignity. She stood there shaking, arms wrapped around her unborn son as the elite of Seoul either laughed or looked away in embarrassment. Not one person moved to help her. She was utterly, completely alone, drowning in shame while cameras captured every second of her breaking. Look at her, Seo Mi-kyung cooed, brushing a speck of lint from Min-jae's lapel as if Soo-yeon didn't exist. A drowned rat. Did you really think a visionary like Min-jae belonged with nobody like you? Someone who brought nothing to this marriage but silence and debt. Soo-yeon's legs trembled. The ballroom spun. 3 years ago, Min-jae had been a charming junior executive meeting her at a volunteer event, telling her he loved her quiet strength, promising he didn't care about her background. She had believed every word. She had hidden her identity as the princess of the Lee clan to protect him. She had rejected her brother's allowance, living on a budget to prove her love was pure. And when her brother, Moo-sung, warned her that Min-jae was a snake, that the background check showed a man hungry for status, not love, she had accused Moo-sung of being a thug who didn't understand normal people. She had screamed that she didn't want his blood money or his violence. She had walked out of the family compound, changed her number, and erased her past. For 3 years, she had endured Min-jae's coldness, convinced she was proving that love could exist without power. And now, here she stood, drenched in wine at her own anniversary, realizing she had traded a brother who would burn the world for her, for a husband who would sell her for a stock tip. Min-jae, why? She tried one last time. You said I was your piece. I lied, Min-jae said simply. The casual cruelty made the guests nearest to them flinch. I said what I needed to say to keep a docile housekeeper. But you were so desperate to play happy family, so eager to be ordinary. You made it pathetically easy. Mi-kyung laughed, a sharp, tinkling sound. She actually thought she mattered. How adorable. The ballroom's double oak doors were suddenly kicked open with a force that cracked the wood. The sound echoed like an explosion. Every head turned. The jazz band stopped dead. And into that sudden, terrified silence, a group of men walked in with the kind of violence that made the air itself feel heavy. Soo-yeon's heart stopped. She knew that silhouette in the center. She'd know him in the dark, even after 3 years of silence. Lee Moo-sung entered first. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo like the other guests. He wore a dark blue suit cut sharp enough to bleed, the collar of a white shirt unbuttoned just enough to reveal the edge of a dragon tattoo climbing his neck. His eyes scanned the ballroom with the predatory focus of a tiger, until they landed on his baby sister, standing there soaking wet, red wine dripping onto the floor. And his expression shifted from cold indifference to a rage so demonic it made the security guards lower their heads and step back. Behind him were 6 lieutenants, men with scarred knuckles and dead eyes, moving in perfect formation to seal off the exits. The hotel manager had tried to stop them. He really had. But he was currently unconscious in the lobby. Now, as Musong walked through the ballroom, the guests, who suddenly recognized the tattoos of the Golden Dragon Syndicate, parted like the Red Sea. These weren't businessmen. These were the men businessmen paid for protection. Min Jae finally looked up from kissing Mi Kyung. He saw a giant of a man walking toward him with purpose. He didn't recognize him yet. He had no idea his life was already over. Musong reached Soo-yeon first. He didn't say a word. He just took off his tailored suit jacket, movements terrifyingly controlled, and draped it around his sister's soaking shoulders. The jacket was heavy, warm, and smelled of sandalwood and high-end tobacco, the scent of the only man who had ever truly protected her. Soo-yeon looked up at her older brother, and the tears she had been holding back finally broke free. "Appa," she whispered, using the childhood honorific. "I'm so sorry. You were right. You were all right." "Shoo." Musong's voice was deep, a rumble meant only for her, as he used his thumb to wipe a streak of wine from her cheek. "We'll talk later. Right now, I need you to go with Lieutenant Choi." "But Min Jae will." "Min Jae will what?" Musong asked. He didn't raise his voice, but the menace in it made Soo-yeon's spine straighten. "Do you think I care what a dead man wants?" Lieutenant Choi appeared at Soo-yeon's side, his hand gentle on her elbow. "Come, Agassi," he said, using the title, young lady, she hadn't heard in years. "The car is warm. The doctor is waiting." Soo-yeon let Choi guide her toward the exit, but she couldn't stop looking back. Min Jae had finally recognized the dragon tattoo. The color had drained from his face, leaving him gray. Mi Kyung was clutching his arm, her earlier confidence evaporating as she realized the man approaching them wasn't security. He was the executioner. "Who do you think you are?" Min Jae demanded, his voice cracking, trying to summon authority he didn't have. "This is a private event. I'll call the police." "The police aren't coming," Musong said calmly, cracking his knuckles. "I own the precinct." Min Jae's mouth opened and closed. Mi Kyung stepped back, suddenly realizing her bold red dress made her a target. Musong stopped 3 feet from Min Jae. He didn't shout. He didn't scream. He just stared down at the billionaire with eyes that promised endless pain. "You know who I am?" Musong asked softly. You're Lee Musong," Min Jae stammered. "The Golden Dragon." "I am Lee Musong," he corrected. "The brother of the pregnant woman you just poured wine on. The brother she left to protect you from my world. The brother who just watched you humiliate her on a live stream." Min Jae went pale. "Live stream?" One of the lieutenants held up a phone. 300,000 views, boss. And climbing. Musong smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You wanted a show, Min Jae. You wanted everyone to see who you really are. Good. Because now they're going to see what happens to men who touch my family. Before we dive into this story, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. This story is going to shake you to your core. So, smash that subscribe button because you do not want to miss what happens next. Now let's begin. Musong turned from his sister to face the ballroom, his movements deliberate and unhurried. The gentle protector vanished, replaced by something far more dangerous. His eyes swept across the frozen crowd with the cold assessment of a predator selecting prey. "My name," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly through the silent ballroom, "is Lee Musong." The reaction was immediate. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A champagne glass shattered on marble. 3 guests near the back exit bolted for the doors, only to find them blocked by Musong's men. The name Lee Musong wasn't just known. It was whispered, feared, the kind of name that made Seoul's elite check their business dealings and pray they'd never crossed the wrong person. "And that woman," Musong continued, gesturing toward where his sister was being escorted out, "the one you just humiliated for your entertainment, is Kim Soo-yeon. My youngest sister. The only family I have left in this world." Min Jae's face had gone from pale to ashen. His hand, still holding his champagne glass, trembled visibly. He opened his mouth, closed it, then tried for his trademark confident smile. It came out as more of a grimace. "Mr. Lee, there's been a misunderstanding. Your sister and we were just..." "Just what?" Musong's voice remained conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. He walked closer, his men moving with him like shadows, forming a loose circle around Min Jae and Mi Kyung. "Just celebrating your anniversary by having your mistress pour champagne over my pregnant sister's head. Just entertaining 300 guests with her humiliation. Just proving to everyone here that you never valued her." Mi Kyung tried to step backward, but one of Musong's men was already there, not touching her but making it clear she wasn't going anywhere. Her red dress, so bold and confident moments ago, now seemed to scream her guilt. Her hands shook as she clutched Min Jae's arm. I didn't know," she stammered. "He said she was nobody. He said she came from nothing." "She came from me," Musong said simply. 6 years ago, my sister told me she'd found a man who loved her for herself, not for our family name or our business interests. She begged me to let her have a normal life. To let her test whether real love could exist outside of power and protection. He paused, letting that sink in. Several guests were recording now, but not with the cruel entertainment from before. This was documentation, evidence, the kind of footage that would be analyzed and whispered about for years. "I agreed," Musong continued, his eyes never leaving Min Jae's face. "Against every instinct, I let my baby sister walk away. I let her marry you. I stayed away from her wedding, from her life, because she asked me to. Because she wanted to prove that love could be real, that someone could choose her for who she was, not what she represented." Min Jae's jaw clenched. A muscle twitched in his cheek. He was calculating, searching for an angle, any way to salvage this situation. His eyes darted to the exits, to his phone on a nearby table, to the frozen security guards who were very deliberately not making eye contact. "But I never stopped watching," Musong said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle, which was somehow worse. "Every cruel word. Every time you made her feel small. Every night you spent with this woman while my sister waited at home, pregnant with your child, believing you'd eventually remember the man you pretended to be." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen. The ballroom's presentation screens, meant for Min Jae's business announcements, suddenly lit up with video footage. Min Jae mocking Soo-yeon to his friends. Min Jae laughing about how easy she was to manipulate. Min Jae with Mi Kyung, planning tonight's humiliation, discussing how they'd finally be rid of the burden. The crowd watched in horrified silence. Business partners Min Jae had courted were already quietly leaving. Investment contacts were making calls, distancing themselves before the inevitable fallout. "So you see, Jang Min Jae," Musong said, pocketing his phone, "you didn't just humiliate some powerless woman tonight. You humiliated Lee Musong's sister. You broke the heart of the one person in this world I would burn down cities to protect." He stepped closer, close enough that only Min Jae could hear his next words. But in the deathly quiet ballroom, his whisper carried like a promise. "And now, I'm going to show you exactly what happens to people who hurt my family. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. But slowly, methodically, I'm going to dismantle everything you've built. Your business, your reputation, your future. And you'll know, every single day, that it's because you were cruel to someone who loved you. Musong stepped back, straightened his cuffs. Enjoy the rest of your party, Mr. Jiang. It's the last good night you'll ever have. He turned and walked toward the exit, his men following. The ballroom doors closed behind them with a final, damning click. Min Jae stood frozen, champagne still dripping from Mi Kyung's bottle, watching his entire world crumble through the eyes of 300 witnesses who would never forget what they'd seen tonight. 7 years earlier, Kim Soo-yeon had stood in the Lee family's private garden, cherry blossoms falling like snow around her, and told her brother she wanted to disappear. Not forever, she'd said, watching Musong's jaw tighten. Just, temporarily. I want to see what life feels like without the Lee name hanging over everything. Musong had been 28 then, already carrying the weight of their family's empire on his shoulders for 5 years since their parents' death. He'd raised Soo-yeon from age 12, protecting her from the darkness of their world, sending her to the best schools, making sure she had choices he'd never had. You want to pretend you're ordinary, he'd said, not a question. You want to see if anyone can love you without knowing who you really are. Is that so wrong? Soo-yeon had asked, tears in her eyes. Everyone who meets me either fears me or wants to use me. I'm 22 years old, Appa, and I've never had a real conversation with someone who didn't know our family name first. Musong had pulled her into his arms, this little sister who'd survived their parents' murder, who'd grown up in bulletproof cars and safe houses, who'd never been allowed to simply be young and foolish and free. 6 months, he'd finally said. You can use mother's maiden name, Kim. I'll have the team set up an apartment, a modest background, a normal life. But you check in every week, and the moment you're in danger. The moment I'm in danger, you'll know before I do, Soo-yeon had finished, knowing her brother had probably already assigned protection she'd never see. 3 weeks later, she'd met Jang Min-jae at a charity fundraiser for underprivileged children. She'd been volunteering, wearing a simple dress from a department store, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. He'd been there courting donors, charismatic and charming, talking about his startup dreams with infectious enthusiasm. You have kind eyes, he'd said, bringing her coffee during her break. Everyone else here is networking, calculating. But you actually care about these kids. She'd fallen for him slowly, carefully. Coffee dates that turned into dinners. Long walks along the Han River where he'd recite poetry and talk about building something meaningful. He'd told her about his struggling business, his dreams of proving himself, his difficult childhood that made him determined to succeed. She'd introduced him as Kim Soo-yeon, elementary school teacher, no family, supporting herself. And he'd seemed to love that about her, her independence, her quiet strength, her lack of connections or wealth to complicate their relationship. For 8 months, it had felt real. He'd met her in modest cafes, never pressuring her for more than she could afford. He'd walked her home to her small apartment, kissed her goodnight like she was precious. When his business struggled, she'd listened and encouraged, and only once, carefully, through an untraceable intermediary, had she arranged for one of his pitches to reach the right investor. The proposal had come on a rooftop restaurant he'd saved for months to afford. Nothing expensive, nothing showy, just Min Jae on one knee promising to build a life with her, to love her through struggle and success, to be her family since she had none. She'd said yes, tears streaming down her face, and called Musong that night. I need more time, she'd begged. I know you said 6 months, but Appa, I found him. Someone who loves me for me. The silence on the other end had been heavy. Soo-yeon, I had him investigated. There are irregularities. His business dealings, his past relationships. You're trying to control me, she'd snapped, old fears surfacing. You can't accept that someone might actually love me without wanting something from our family. I'm trying to protect you. By sabotaging my happiness? By making sure I'm alone forever, dependent on you? The words had come out cruel, unfair, weapons she'd known would hurt. I don't need the Lee family's protection anymore. I need you to trust me. The engagement party had been small, mostly Min Jae's friends and business contacts. Moo Song had come anyway, stood in the corner watching with those sharp, calculating eyes. When he'd publicly questioned Min Jae's intentions, suggesting his sudden success seemed conveniently timed with their engagement, Soo-yeon had been mortified. She'd confronted him outside, voice shaking with anger and hurt. If you can't be happy for me, then I don't need you at my wedding. I don't need your money or your name or your paranoid protection. I'm choosing my own life, and Min Jae is choosing me. Moo Song had looked at her for a long moment, and she'd seen something break in his eyes. If you ever need me, he'd finally said, I'm 8 blocks away. Always 8 blocks away. They'd eloped 3 weeks later. She'd changed her number, blocked his calls, returned his letters unopened. For 6 years, she'd built a life proving she didn't need the Lee family. And tonight, soaked in champagne and shame, she'd finally learned the difference between independence and isolation, between testing love and losing it entirely. Her brother had been right all along. Outside the Azure Sky Hotel, Soo-yeon sat in the back of a black Mercedes, Dr. Park's gentle hands checking her blood pressure while the baby kicked restlessly inside her. Through the tinted windows, she could see guests streaming out of the ballroom, their faces pale, their phones already raised as they called lawyers, PR teams, anyone who could distance them from the disaster unfolding inside. Your blood pressure is elevated, Dr. Park said softly, her eyes kind. But the baby's heartbeat is strong. You need rest, though. Stress like this. I know, Soo-yeon whispered, her hands trembling around the warm tea one of Moo Song's men had brought her. The jacket her brother had draped over her shoulders still smelled like him, like safety and childhood and all the protection she'd thrown away. Inside the ballroom, Moo Song hadn't left. He stood at the presentation podium, Min Jae's podium, where he'd planned to announce some new business venture tonight. And scrolled through his tablet with the calm precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence. I want to show you all something, he said to the remaining guests, those too curious or too trapped to flee. 6 years of documentation. Because while my sister believed she was living independently, testing true love, I was doing what I've always done, protecting her the only way she'd allow. The screens lit up again. This time, the footage was time-stamped, dated, a comprehensive chronicle of betrayal. Month 3 of the marriage, Min Jae at a bar with colleagues, laughing. The wife? She's useful. Quiet, obedient, doesn't ask questions. Perfect cover while I build real connections. His friends toasted him, congratulated him on his strategy. Month 8, Min Jae on the phone with someone, his voice cold. Soo-yeon thinks I'm working late. She's so trusting it's almost pathetic. Yes, I'll be there in 20 minutes. The timestamp showed 11 p.m. The next clip showed him entering a hotel with a woman who wasn't his wife. Month 14, Min Jae meeting with investors, his wedding ring conspicuously absent. My personal life is complicated, but I'm working on simplifying it. Once I've secured the Park Industries contract, I won't need the marriage anymore. Year 3, Meek-young appearing in the footage, their affair already established. The two of them in Min Jae's office, laughing about Soo-yeon's pregnancy announcement. She actually cried when she told me, Min Jae said, mimicking tears mockingly. Like I'd be happy about being trapped further. The ballroom had gone silent except for the audio from the videos. Guests who'd laughed at Soo-yeon's humiliation an hour ago now looked sick, ashamed, complicit in something far darker than they'd realized. Min Jae stood frozen, his carefully constructed mask cracking with each new clip. His business partners were already backing toward exits, their association with him suddenly toxic. The investors he'd courted were deleting his contact information in real time. But Moo Song wasn't finished. Last week, he said, pulling up the final video, my sister called Min Jae from the hospital. She'd had contractions, false labor, was terrified something was wrong with the baby. The footage showed Min Jae in a restaurant with Mi Kyung, his phone buzzing with Soo-yeon's calls. He glanced at the screen, showed it to Mi Kyung, and they both laughed. He declined the call and ordered another bottle of wine. The next clip, Moo Song said, his voice harder now, is from tonight. 2 hours before this party. Min Jae and Mi Kyung in a hotel suite, discussing their plan. We humiliate her publicly, Mi Kyung was saying, adjusting her red dress. Make it so devastating she leaves on her own. Then you're free, we can be together officially, and you don't have to deal with divorce lawyers or splitting assets. She'll be too ashamed to fight back, Min Jae agreed, nodding his tie. That's who she is, quiet, passive, accepting. She'll just disappear, and everyone will forget she existed. The screens went dark. The silence in the ballroom was suffocating. Moo Song looked directly at Min Jae. You said my sister would be too ashamed to fight back. You were wrong. She won't fight back, I will. He nodded to his men. They produced folders, began distributing them to remaining guests, particularly those Moo Song knew were journalists, business columnists, investors. Inside you'll find documentation of Jang Min Jae's business fraud, tax evasion, and breach of contract with 7 different partners. Also included are the names of everyone who knew about his affair and said nothing, everyone who enabled his cruelty, everyone who laughed tonight while a pregnant woman was humiliated. Min Jae finally found his voice. You can't do this. This is blackmail, extortion. This is consequence, Moo Song corrected. You wanted to see what happens when you hurt someone powerless. Now you'll see what happens when you hurt someone I love. Outside, in the Mercedes, Soo-yeon watched the screens through the hotel's windows, saw 6 years of lies displayed in high definition, and finally understood that she hadn't been testing love at all. She'd been the only one who'd ever offered it. Moo Song had offered to handle everything, the divorce, the lawyers, the complete destruction of Jang Min Jae's life. But Soo-yeon had asked for one thing first. I need to talk to him, she'd said, her voice steady despite the tears still drying on her cheeks. Alone. Just once. I need to hear him try to explain this to my face. Her brother's jaw had clenched, every protective instinct clearly screaming against it. But he'd nodded, because even now, even after everything, he respected her choice. 5 minutes, he'd said. I'll be right outside the door. Now Soo-yeon sat in a private conference room off the ballroom, her hands folded over her pregnant belly, watching Min Jae pace like a caged animal. His perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit rumpled. The confidence he'd worn like armor had cracked, revealing something desperate and small underneath. Soo-yeon, please, he started, his voice taking on that familiar pleading tone she'd heard 1,000 times before. You have to understand, tonight was a mistake. I was drunk, I wasn't thinking clearly. Mi Kyung, she manipulated me, convinced me that. Stop, Soo-yeon said quietly. The single word cut through his excuses like a blade. Min Jae stopped pacing, turned to face her. She could see him calculating, searching for the right words, the right performance. It was the same look he got during business negotiations, when he was deciding which lie would be most effective. I love you, he said, dropping to his knees beside her chair in a gesture that might have looked romantic if she hadn't seen the videos of him mocking this exact vulnerability. I know I've been terrible, I know I've hurt you, but it's because I've been under so much pressure. Building the company, trying to prove myself worthy of you. Worthy of me? Soo-yeon's laugh was bitter. Or worthy of the connections you thought I'd eventually provide? Tell me, Min Jae, when exactly were you planning to ask about my family? After the baby was born? After you'd secured enough contracts to not need me anymore? His face flickered, just for a second, with something ugly. Frustration that she wasn't playing her role, wasn't being the quiet, forgiving wife he'd trained her to be. That's not fair, he tried. Yes, I made mistakes. Yes, I got involved with Mikyung when I should have been focusing on our marriage. But you lied too, didn't you? You've been lying this whole time about who you really are. There it was. The deflection, the attempt to make her the villain in their story. I lied about my last name, Soo-yeon said, her voice calm now, almost clinical. I wanted to know if someone could love Kim Soo-yeon, the elementary school teacher, the woman with no connections, no wealth, nothing to offer except herself. I was testing whether real love could exist. She stood, and Min-jae scrambled to his feet, reaching for her hand. She pulled away. But you were testing something different, weren't you? She continued. You were testing how much you could get away with. How small you could make me feel. How thoroughly you could use me before discarding me. That's not, Soo-yeon, I can change. We can go to counseling, I'll end things with Mikyung, I'll do whatever you want. I wanted a husband who chose me, she said, and her voice finally broke on the words. Not because of my family or my name or what I could give you. I wanted someone who saw me, really saw me, and decided I was enough exactly as I was. She pulled off her wedding ring, the simple gold band he'd saved months to buy back when his love had been an elaborate performance. It felt heavier than it should, weighted with 6 years of hoping, believing, forgiving. You wanted a trophy wife, she continued. Someone quiet and grateful and easy to control. You wanted the appearance of a good man without actually having to be one. Please, Min-jae's voice cracked now, real panic setting in as he realized his usual manipulation tactics weren't working. Think about the baby. Our child needs a father. Our child needs to grow up knowing what real love looks like, Soo-yeon interrupted. She needs to see that her mother chose dignity over destruction. That walking away from cruelty isn't failure, it's strength. She set the ring on the conference table between them. I was testing your heart, Jang Min-jae. For 6 years, I gave you every opportunity to prove the man you claimed to be was real. Tonight, you finally showed me the truth. She walked toward the door, each step feeling lighter despite the weight of her pregnant belly, despite the tears streaming down her face. You failed, she said without turning back. And I'm done pretending you didn't. The door opened. Musong stood there, his expression carefully neutral, though she could see the pride in his eyes. He offered her his arm, and she took it, leaning into the brother she should never have pushed away. Behind them, Min-jae stood alone in the conference room, holding a wedding ring that had always meant more to her than it ever had to him, finally understanding that he'd destroyed the only real thing he'd ever had. The Lee family estate sat in Pyeongchang-dong, behind walls that had witnessed decades of power, violence, and carefully maintained secrets. Soo-yeon had forgotten how quiet it was here, not peaceful quiet, but the heavy silence of a place where even the birds knew better than to sing too loudly. Her old room had been preserved exactly as she'd left it 6 years ago. Musong had kept fresh flowers on the nightstand every week, she learned from the housekeeper, just in case she ever came home. You never gave up on me, Soo-yeon said on her third night back, sitting across from her brother at dinner. The table was too large for 2 people, designed for the family that no longer existed. I never will, Musong replied, cutting her meat into small pieces like he'd done when she was 12 and still learning proper table manners. Some habits, apparently, never died. Outside those walls, Min-jae's world was systematically collapsing. It started Monday morning when Park Industries pulled out of their flagship deal, the contract Min-jae had spent 2 years cultivating, the one that was supposed to triple his company's value. The official reason was unforeseen conflicts of interest. The real reason was a single phone call from Lee Musong. By Tuesday, 3 major investors had withdrawn funding. Their lawyers cited the same vague language, reassessing partnership compatibility, and diverging business ethics. Min-jae's frantic calls went unanswered. His emails bounced back. Doors that had always opened for him were suddenly, permanently closed. Wednesday brought a tax audit, thorough, invasive, the kind that found every questionable deduction in creative accounting practice Min-jae had employed over the years. The kind that resulted from someone with significant influence making a very specific request to very specific people. His business partners started resigning, releasing carefully worded statements that distanced themselves from his personal choices and leadership concerns. The videos from the party had leaked, of course, not the full extent of Musong's evidence, just enough to make Min-jae socially toxic. Just enough to make everyone wonder what other cruelties he'd committed behind closed doors. Mi-kyung's destruction was quieter but no less complete. The modeling contracts dried up first. Brands didn't want their products associated with that woman from the video. Then came the social exile. Invitations to gallery openings, charity galas, the elite events where she built her reputation, simply stopped arriving. Her apartment lease was mysteriously not renewed. Her favorite restaurants were suddenly always fully booked when she called. Anonymous tips reached her employer about inappropriate relationships with clients. Nothing provably illegal, nothing that could be traced back to the Lee family, but enough to make her disappear from the circles where she'd once reigned. On Thursday, Min-jae made his biggest mistake. His lawyer filed for partial custody, claiming parental rights to the unborn child. The filing argued that Soo-yeon's sudden abandonment and unstable family connections made her an unfit mother. It demanded DNA testing, supervised visitation, and financial control over child-rearing decisions. Musong read the filing in his office, his expression unchanging. But the men who worked for him, who'd learned to read the subtle shifts in their boss's demeanor, quietly cleared their schedules. When Lee Musong got very still, very quiet, someone was about to learn a terrible lesson. He wants to claim the baby, Musong said to his sister that evening, keeping his voice carefully neutral. He's arguing you're unstable. Soo-yeon's hand went protectively to her belly, where her daughter, their daughter, though Min-jae would never deserve that title, kicked restlessly. He doesn't want her, she said quietly. He wants leverage. Something to use against us. I know. Musong's jaw tightened. Which is why his lawyers will receive a counter-filing tomorrow that will make them wish they'd chosen different career paths. The counter-filing, when it came, was devastating. Evidence of Min-jae's affair documented in exhaustive detail. Proof of his financial instability and fraudulent business practices. Medical records showing Soo-yeon's excellent prenatal care and stable condition. Character witnesses, dozens of them, testifying to her fitness as a mother. But the most damaging evidence was simpler, recordings of Min-jae, in his own words, saying he never wanted the child. That the pregnancy was a trap. That he'd planned to pressure Soo-yeon into termination before deciding public humiliation and abandonment was easier. His custody claim was withdrawn within 48 hours. His lawyers issued an apology and quietly removed themselves from his representation. Even his own family, the Jang family, who'd initially supported their son, released a statement expressing deep regret and complete support for Ms. Kim's full custody. In his emptying penthouse, Min-jae stared at legal bills he couldn't pay, at a phone that never rang with good news anymore, at a future that had crumbled to dust in less than 2 weeks. He'd thought humiliating Lee Musong's sister would be entertainment. He was learning it was a death sentence.
In the heart of the city, where even shadows know to bow, Minho Park moves through a sunlit park like a blade cutting silk. His white t-shirt does nothing to hide the storm of ink crawling up both arms, each tattoo a gravestone for someone who crossed him. Mothers grab their children. Vendors look away. Even the pigeons scatter. Then she appears. A little girl in a white dress with a pink ribbon, hair pulled into a perfect puff, steps directly into his path. His bodyguards in their dark suits move forward, hands reaching for concealed weapons. But Minho raises one tattooed hand, stopping them cold. Because this child isn't running. She's offering something. Mister, Maya says, her small dark fingers pressing a crumpled dollar bill toward the most dangerous man in the city. They say you're the baddest person here. I need to hire you. The Silent King stares at the dollar. 1. Single. Dollar. His mind races through 1,000 violent transactions, million-dollar contracts signed in blood, empires bought and sold. But never this. A child treating him like a professional. Not begging, hiring. The bodyguards exchange confused glances. The park holds its breath. And then Minho Park does something he hasn't done in 15 years. He reaches out and takes the dollar. What? He asks quietly, his voice like gravel wrapped in silk. Do you need a monster for? Maya doesn't flinch under his gaze. Most grown men would be sweating by now, calculating escape routes, measuring the distance to the nearest exit. But this child, no older than 7, stands her ground like she's negotiating a business deal at a boardroom table. My mama's sick, she says, and for the first time, Minho hears the tremor beneath her brave voice. Real sick. The kind where she can't get out of bed most days, and when she does, she pretends she's okay so I won't worry. Minho's expression doesn't change, but something flickers in his eyes. His bodyguards remain frozen, waiting for a signal that never comes. There's this man, Maya continues, her grip tightening on the dollar bill. Mr. Vane. He owns our building. Says we gotta be out by tomorrow morning or he's gonna throw all our stuff on the street. Mama tried talking to him, tried explaining about her medical bills, but he just laughed. Called her a, she stops, her jaw clenching. Called her names I'm not supposed to repeat. The park seems quieter now. Even the distant traffic sounds muted, as if the city itself is leaning in to listen. I heard kids at school talking about you, Maya says, looking up at him with those impossibly steady eyes. They said their daddies cross the street when they see you coming. Said you're the only person in this whole city that monsters are afraid of. She takes a breath. So I saved up my allowance. Took me 3 months to get this whole dollar together. Minho almost laughs, almost, but there's something about the way she says it. Like that dollar represents every ounce of power she has in this world, and she's willing to spend it all on a stranger covered in tattoos who most people pray they never meet. You think $1 buys a monster? He asks, his voice low and dangerous. Maya's chin lifts. I think $1 buys your time. And maybe if you hear what he's doing, maybe you'll decide it's worth doing for free. Because people who hurt sick ladies and little girls. Her eyes narrow. Those are the real monsters. And I heard you don't like monsters much either. Silence stretches between them like a tightrope. Then Minho reaches out with his tattooed hand and plucks the dollar from her small fingers. He examines it, wrinkled, worn, probably passed through 100 hands before landing in hers. He folds it carefully and slides it into his pocket. Consider yourself hired, he says quietly. Where does Mr. Vane live? Behind him, one bodyguard pulls out a phone. The other's hand finally drops from his concealed weapon. Maya's shoulders sag with relief so profound she almost stumbles. You mean it? You'll really help. Minho doesn't smile. He never smiles. But his next words are perhaps the closest thing to a promise he's made in years. I always honor my contracts, Miss Johnson. Maya Johnson. Miss Johnson. He nods once, sharp and final. Tell me everything. The black Mercedes glides away from the park with the whisper of expensive engineering. Minho sits in the back seat, Maya's crumpled dollar bill resting on his palm like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. Through the tinted windows, he watches the city transform from manicured green spaces to cracked sidewalks and boarded-up storefronts. Everything, he says to the driver, not bothering to look up. Maya Johnson. Her mother. This Mr. Vane. I want bank records, property deeds, medical files, parking tickets. If he breathes, I want to know the pattern. The driver, a man named Jin who once made 3 people disappear in a single night, nods and makes a call. In Minho's world, information moves faster than money. By the time they reach his office in the financial district, his phone is already buzzing with incoming reports. He reads them in the elevator. Each new detail is a knife twist. Maya Johnson, age 7. Mother, Diane Johnson, 34, stage 3 lupus. Father, unknown, not in picture. Address, 1247, Brennan Street, apartment 3C. The next file contains photos. Minho's jaw tightens as he scrolls through surveillance images his people pulled from traffic cameras and social media. The building where Maya lives isn't just old, it's actively dying. Water-stained walls. Windows patched with cardboard and duct tape. A front door that doesn't quite close all the way. More data floods in. Diane Johnson worked 3 jobs before the lupus made her too weak to stand for 8-hour shifts. She's behind on rent by 4 months, but only because the landlord tripled it 6 months ago. Every other tenant in the building faces the same predatory increase. Half have already been forced out. Then comes Mr. Vane's file, and Minho's expression goes completely cold. Marcus Vane, 52. Portfolio? 47 properties across the city, all in low-income neighborhoods. Known for buying struggling buildings, minimal maintenance, maximum rent extraction. Legal complaints, 127. Convictions, 0. There are photos of Vane too. A thick man in cheap suits, always smiling like he's selling you something you'll regret buying. In one image, he's standing in front of the Brennan Street building, arms crossed, while a family loads their belongings into a rusted van. He's laughing. Minho's thumb hovers over that photo for a long moment. He's destroyed men for far less than this. Burned down empires over insults and missed payments. But those were transactions between predators, everyone knew the rules, everyone played the game willingly. This is different. A man in an expensive office is using the law like a weapon to bleed poor families dry. A 7-year-old girl had to hire a gangster because the system that's supposed to protect her has already failed. Minho sets his phone down and stares out at the city skyline, at all the gleaming towers built on someone else's suffering. Get me the ownership papers for 1247, Brennan Street, he says quietly. And find out what Mr. Vane loves most in this world. Jin glances in the rearview mirror. How much are we authorized to spend? Minho touches the dollar in his pocket. Whatever it takes. Minho stands alone in his office as the sun bleeds orange across the city. He's rolled up his sleeves, and in the fading light, his tattoos seem to move, a gallery of ghosts etched in ink and regret. The dragon coiling around his left forearm. That was for the Chen family, who thought they could skim from his operations. He'd been 23, eager to prove himself, and he'd made sure everyone knew the price of betrayal. The Chens left the city in the dead of night. Some say they left in pieces. The lotus flower on his right bicep, beautiful and deceptive. A reminder of the woman who tried to poison him at a peace negotiation. He'd survived. She hadn't. He got the tattoo the same night, while her blood was still under his fingernails. Each mark tells a story written in violence and sealed with fear. Debts paid in suffering. Contracts enforced with brutality. He pulls Maya's dollar from his pocket and sets it on his desk next to a tumbler of whiskey he hasn't touched. $1. In his world, contracts are signed with tens of millions, enforced with the implicit threat of obliteration. His accepted payment in diamonds, in deeds, in desperate promises. But never this. Never a child's entire savings pressed into his palm like a prayer. And yet, his finger traces the edge of the worn bill. In the old country, his grandmother used to tell stories about blood oaths, promises so sacred that breaking them would curse your entire bloodline. She said a true debt wasn't measured in money but in honor. That the smallest promise, if given with a pure heart, carried more weight than all the gold in the emperor's treasury. Minho presses his thumb against the lotus tattoo until it hurts. He made his reputation on being merciless, on treating every interaction as a transaction with calculated returns. But maybe that's exactly why this matters. Maybe the only way to prove he's more than just a monster is to honor the contract that offers him nothing but a chance at something he'd forgotten existed. Redemption. He picks up his phone and sends a single message to his inner circle, conference room. Now. Full mobilization. Within 20 minutes, 8 people sit around his table. These are his best. The ones who can make buildings disappear from public records, who can turn a man's assets into smoke, who move through the world like well-dressed shadows. We have a contract, Minho says, placing Maya's dollar in the center of the table. $1. Consider it a blood oath. The client is 7 years old, and she hired us to eliminate a threat. Jin raises an eyebrow. Eliminate. Destroy, Minho corrects, his voice cold as winter steel. But we do this clean. No blood. No bodies. I want Marcus Vane erased from this city like he never existed. I want him to lose everything, his properties, his money, his reputation, his peace of mind. And I want him to know, in his bones, that he brought this on himself. He looks around the table, meeting each pair of eyes. This isn't about profit. This is about a sick woman and her daughter who have nothing left except $1 and the hope that monsters can be controlled. He leans forward. So we show Mr. Vane what a real monster looks like. Marcus Vane pours himself a third glass of scotch and admires the view from his downtown condo. 23rd floor, floor-to-ceiling windows, leather furniture that costs more than most of his tenants make in a year. He's celebrating. Tomorrow morning, the Brennan Street building will be cleared out, and he's already got a developer interested in the property. Luxury condos, they are calling it. Urban renewal. He prefers to call it progress. His phone buzzes with a text from his lawyer. All eviction notices served. Sheriff's Department confirmed for 8 a.m. Vane smiles and raises his glass to his reflection in the window. 47 properties and counting. His father said he'd never amount to anything, but look at him now. A self-made man. He doesn't notice when the security camera in the hallway goes dark. Or when the backup system fails 30 seconds later. Or when the building's keycard access system registers a series of authorized entries that were never actually authorized. Vane is scrolling through his phone, already mentally spending tomorrow's profits, when he hears it. Not a sound, exactly. More like the absence of sound. The ambient hum of the building, the elevator machinery, the distant traffic, the neighbor's television, all of it suddenly feels muffled, distant, wrong. He looks up from his phone. 2 men in dark suits stand in his living room. Vane's scotch glass slips from his hand, shattering against the hardwood. What the, how did you, he scrambles backward, reaching for his phone. I'm calling the police. I'm calling. No, says the taller one, Jin, with the kind of calm that's more terrifying than any threat. You're not. The second man, younger, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, moves to the window and draws the curtains closed with deliberate precision. The gesture is almost domestic, like his tidying up before dinner guests arrive. Marcus Vane, Jin continues, pulling out a tablet. 47 properties. 127 legal complaints. 0 convictions. Quite an impressive record. Vane's back hits the wall. His mind races through options, the panic button under his desk, the gun in his bedroom safe, the security company that should have called by now. Listen, I don't know who sent you, but I have money. Whatever they're paying, I'll double it. Triple it. Jin doesn't even blink. Our employer isn't interested in your money. Then what? What do you want? The apartment door opens, and Vane's heart nearly stops. Minho Park walks in wearing the same white t-shirt from the park, his tattooed arms relaxed at his sides. He moves like he owns the place, slow, unhurried, absolutely certain. He surveys the condo with the faint disdain of someone examining a particularly disappointing restaurant. Nice place, Minho says quietly, settling into Vane's leather chair like it's a throne. Let's talk about how you're going to lose it. Vane's legs give out. He slides down the wall, landing hard on the floor. Who are you? Minho pulls a crumpled dollar bill from his pocket and sets it on the coffee table. I'm the man a 7-year-old girl hired to scare away the monster. His eyes go cold. Congratulations, Mr. Vane. You're the monster. Minho doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. Terror has a frequency that only certain people can transmit, and right now, Marcus Vane is receiving it loud and clear. You like numbers, don't you, Mr. Vane? Minho asks, crossing one ankle over his knee. Profit margins. Return on investment. The mathematics of misery. He gestures to Jin, who sets the tablet on the coffee table and swipes through a series of documents. Vane's eyes widen as he recognizes his own financial record scrolling past. Bank statements. Property deeds. Mortgage documents. Things that should be locked behind passwords and encryption, and lawyers who charge $500 an hour. Here's a number for you, Minho continues. 1.2 million. That's what you owe to the Golden Tiger Casino in Macau. They've been very patient with you, haven't they? Letting you make minimum payments, extending your deadline month after month. He tilts his head. Want to guess who owns your debt now? The color drains from Vane's face. That's impossible. They would never sell. Everyone sells, Minho interrupts. You should know that better than anyone. You built your entire empire on buying things from desperate people at a fraction of their worth. He leans forward. I paid full price. Premium, actually. Because I wanted them to understand how serious I was. Jin swipes to another document. And here's 1247, Brennan Street. Your property. Or rather, it was your property as of 4 hours ago. The deed is now held by a charitable trust that specializes in affordable housing. Non-profit. Very particular about tenant protections. Vane tries to stand, but his legs won't cooperate. You can't just, there are laws, procedures, I have lawyers. You have lawyers who take your money and tell you what you want to hear, Minho says. My lawyers actually win cases. They're very expensive. Much more expensive than yours. He pulls out his phone and shows Vane the screen. These are your other 46 properties. Notice anything different? The list of addresses is there, but next to each one, the ownership status has changed. Sold. Transferred. Foreclosed. A symphony of financial destruction orchestrated in a single afternoon. How? Vane's voice cracks. How is this possible? You made it easy, Minho replies. You leveraged everything. Used each property as collateral for the next. Built a house of cards and called it an empire. I just had to pull one card, and he makes a gentle downward gesture with his hand, like a building collapsing in slow motion. Vane's breathing becomes rapid, shallow. What do you want? Just tell me what you want. Minho stands, buttoning his cuffs with casual precision. I want you to understand something, Mr. Vane. That little girl you were going to throw onto the street tomorrow? She paid me $1 to protect her mother. $1. He walks to the window and looks out at the city lights. You've taken millions from people who had nothing. So I took everything from you. It's just business, right? That's what you always tell them. He turns back, and his expression is carved from ice. Here's the deal.
How are the new safe houses in Gwangju? Musong asked, setting Ji-woo down when she squirmed to return to the daycare center and the cookies that awaited. Opening next month. We have a waiting list already. Soo-yeon accepted the flowers, arranged them in the vase she kept on her desk specifically for her brother's weekly deliveries. The regional government is finally cooperating with funding. Turns out having the Lee family's support encourages bureaucratic efficiency. Imagine that, Mu Song said dryly. They stood together at the window, watching the foundation's activity below. Women arriving for appointments, leaving with resources and hope. Children playing safely while their mothers rebuilt shattered lives. Volunteers, some of them women the foundation had helped years ago, now giving back, creating a cycle of support and healing. Across Seoul, in a gashawan so small the bed folded into the wall, Jang Min-jae existed rather than lived. He worked 3 part-time jobs now: convenience store clerk, delivery driver, night security at a building he'd once owned shares in. The bankruptcy had been finalized 4 years ago. The social exile was permanent. He'd seen Mi-kyung once, 2 years after the party, in a subway station. She'd been wearing cheap clothes, her glamorous hair now simply cut, her face bare of the expensive makeup she'd once worn like armor. Their eyes had met for a brief second. She'd looked away first, hurrying toward a different platform, disappearing into crowds of people who didn't know or care who she'd been. Rumor said she worked at a factory in Incheon now, manufacturing electronics under a name that wasn't her own. That the Lee family had made sure she could survive but never thrive, exist but never rise. Min-jae didn't know if the rumors were true. He'd learned not to ask questions about things connected to that family. Sometimes, late at night in his tiny room, he searched Soo-yeon's name online. Found articles about the foundation's expansion, interviews where she spoke about turning pain into purpose, photos of her at charity events, poised, confident, surrounded by people who genuinely respected her. In one recent photo, she stood with Ji-woo and Mu Song at a foundation fundraiser. The caption identified her as philanthropist Kim Soo-yeon, founder of New Dawn Foundation and sister of prominent businessman Lee Mu-song. The life he could have had smiled back at him from glossy magazine pages, thriving beautifully in his absence. Back at the foundation, Soo-yeon walked through the main floor, greeting women by name, listening to victories and setbacks, offering encouragement wrapped in understanding. A young mother showed her photos of her new apartment. The first place she'd ever lived without fear. A grandmother thanked her for the legal support that had won her custody of her grandchildren. "You saved my life," the grandmother said, tears in her eyes. "No," Soo-yeon corrected gently. "You saved your own life. You walked through our doors. You chose safety over familiar pain. I just helped clear the path." As evening approached, Ji-woo emerged from the daycare center, her artwork clutched in small hands. "Yama, I drew our family. See? That's you, that's me, and that's Uncle being scary to bad people." The drawing showed 3 figures, a woman, a child, and a tall man with an impressively fierce expression. Soo-yeon laughed, pulling her daughter close. "Is Uncle scary?" she asked. Ji-woo considered this seriously. "Only to bad people. He's nice to us." "That's right, baby. That's exactly right." Mu-song drove them home as sunset painted Seoul gold and pink. In the back seat, Ji-woo chattered about her day, her voice filling the car with innocent joy. Soo-yeon listened, her hand resting on her brother's shoulder, this man who'd never stopped loving her, even when she'd pushed him away. She'd tested whether real love existed. Whether someone could value her for who she was rather than what she represented. She'd found her answer, just not where she'd expected. Real love was her brother's patient protection. Her daughter's absolute trust. The women at her foundation, supporting each other through darkness toward light. Real power wasn't in cruelty or control. It was in respect, in lifting others, in transforming pain into purpose. Jang Min-jae had chased status and lost everything. Soo-yeon had chosen dignity and built a legacy. And in the end, that made all the difference. Soo-yeon proved that a queen doesn't need a king when she has a dragon for a brother. Who is the one person in your life who would burn the world down just to keep you safe? Shout out your protector in the comments below. And if you love seeing justice served, hit that subscribe button and welcome to the family. We've got your back. Please subscribe now and hit that notification bell so you never miss another incredible shout out your protector in the comments below.